On the distant planet Zephyria, the royal garden stretched across terraces of crystal blue grass, fountains of glowing liquid, and trees with translucent leaves that shimmered under the twin suns. Birds with feathers of silver and violet chirped melodiously, but their songs could not reach the sadness in Princess Elara's heart. She sat alone on a carved stone bench, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her antennae drooping slightly as if mirroring her mood. Though her skin glowed softly in the pale light, it could not hide the deep scars that ran across her face, reminders of an accident from her childhood. From the day she had been hurt, the court had treated her differently. Noble children whispered behind her back during lessons, muttering that a princess should be flawless, perfect, and unblemished. The adults, though polite, kept their distance, giving her tasks that no one else wanted or leaving her out of events where her presence might have mattered. At dinner banquets, suitors who came to seek her hand in marriage avoided her eyes and lingered instead around other, more acceptable young ladies. Elara could feel the judgment in their glances, even when the words were not spoken. Despite the beauty of the garden, Elara felt a hollow ache inside. She had everything her people could give, a royal title, a palace, tutors and servants, but no one truly saw her. When she walked the halls, the whispers followed her, and she often imagined that if she vanished, no one would notice. Many nights, she cried quietly in her chamber, the soft glow of her blue skin dimmed by tears, her reflection in the polished glass showing a face that felt unworthy and unloved. Yet even in this loneliness, Elara held on to small sparks of hope. Sometimes she watched from the balcony as children played among the crystal fountains, laughing freely. She wished she could join them to feel joy without fear of judgment. When she was younger, her mother had told her, "The heart is stronger than any scar, my dear. One day the world will see what you carry inside." But the princess wondered if that day would ever come. She felt invisible and small, even under the grand arches of her palace and the brilliant skies above. Every morning she walked to the garden to breathe in the faint fragrance of luminescent flowers and to listen to the humming streams. She would watch the twin suns rise, feeling the warmth touch her shoulders while remembering that no matter how radiant the light, it never seemed to reach her fully. The court ignored her presence. Her teachers gave her lessons alone in quiet chambers, and the suitors never approached. Sometimes she imagined what it would be like to leave Zephyria entirely, to disappear among the stars where no one would care about scars, titles, or appearances. Elara's loneliness was compounded by the knowledge that her people valued perfection in all things. Even simple mistakes or imperfections were frowned upon. Her scars, although harmless and a part of who she was, became symbols of shame in a society obsessed with appearances. She tried to hide them with soft veils or subtle makeup designed for her alien physiology, but it never changed the way the court treated her. Every gesture of kindness she made was overlooked, every achievement downplayed, and every smile returned with indifference or pity. One day, as she walked among the crystal fountains, a soft breeze rustled the translucent leaves. Elara closed her eyes, wishing that someone would see her not for her appearance, but for the courage she carried within her, the resilience she had shown since the accident, the quiet kindness she offered to the few who sought her company, and the loyalty she held to her family and her people despite the coldness she endured. She whispered to herself, "No one wants me, not here, not anywhere." The words trembled in the air like fragile glass, unheard by anyone but the birds, the wind, and the palace walls. Even in her solitude, Elara longed for connection, someone who could see past her scars, someone who could recognize her heart. She watched the horizon, imagining a companion who might walk beside her without fear or judgment. The garden around her sparkled in the sunlight, but all its beauty felt hollow without someone to share it with. She wished more than anything that someone, anyone, might reach out and tell her she was enough, that her scars did not define her, and that her loneliness was not deserved. As the suns climbed higher in the sky, casting golden light across the palace, Elara remained on the bench, still alone. Her blue skin shimmered faintly, her antennae twitching as if they too longed for recognition. She sighed a soft, wistful sound and whispered again, "No one wants me." The words floated into the warm morning air, unheard by the busy court, unheard by the indifferent suitors, and unnoticed by the bustling palace servants. And yet, somewhere beyond the walls of Zephyria, beyond the crystal fountains and twin suns, destiny waited, ready to answer the princess's silent cry in ways she could not yet imagine. In that quiet moment, Princess Elara did not know that her life was about to change, that the walls of indifference surrounding her heart were about to be breached, not by the expectations of her people, but by the unexpected courage and kindness of a human mechanic who would see her worth where no one else did. For now she sat alone, shimmering softly in the sunlight, a princess unseen and unheard, but soon that would all change. If you want, I can continue. Over the next few weeks, the palace seemed less like a lonely cage for Princess Elara and more like a place where small moments of warmth could be found. Alex Carter, the human mechanic, continued visiting to repair the palace's machinery, which included delicate transport systems, lighting devices, and occasionally broken study gadgets in the princess's private chambers. Each time he arrived, he brought more than just tools. He brought calmness, patience, and gentle words. At first, Elara was cautious. She had lived her whole life being watched and judged by the nobles, who whispered behind her back about every imperfection, every misstep. Humans were rare on Zephyria, often regarded as fragile and unremarkable. She feared that Alex might be another observer, someone who would notice her scars and silently judge her as the others did. When he first spoke to her, offering to help with a malfunctioning HoloBook projector, she hesitated. I don't need help, she said softly, her antennae flicking nervously. Alex smiled gently and shrugged. It's my job, princess. I'm happy to help. There was no sarcasm in his voice, no hint of pity, just quiet sincerity. He knelt to adjust the device, carefully checking each wire and circuit. Elara watched him from a short distance, unsure whether she should trust this human who seemed so different from the others who had disappointed her. Gradually, Alex's visits became a routine, and with each visit, he offered little acts of kindness that didn't demand attention or reward. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a rare fruit from his homeworld, or a mechanical trinket he had built in his spare time. He held doors open for her when she walked through corridors, or picked up a book she had dropped on the polished floor. He never forced conversation, yet always listened when she spoke, nodding as if her words mattered, which they rarely did with the Zephyrian court. Elara began noticing things she had forgotten to notice in the past. The subtle whir of machinery, the tiny flicker of light in Alex's eyes when he worked carefully, the patience in his hands as he adjusted delicate parts without breaking anything. Each small act, though seemingly trivial, felt like a bridge reaching out toward her heart. Slowly, the walls of caution around her began to soften. Despite her initial wariness, Elara found herself smiling at Alex's quiet humor and honest observations. He would tell simple stories of Earth, a faulty hovercar he had repaired, a funny mishap involving a crate of fragile parts, or a mistake he had made while assembling a small robotic assistant. He never made fun of anyone, never spoke down to her or the court. For the first time in years, Elara felt that someone saw her not as a princess with scars, but as a person. There were moments, however, when doubt crept back in. The nobles still whispered when they noticed Alex's visits, questioning why a human was allowed near the princess. Perhaps he is trying to manipulate her, one advisor murmured. Humans cannot be trusted, another said. Elara heard the whispers but did not respond. She realized she was beginning to care for Alex's opinion more than the court's, valuing the person who treated her with respect above the ones who had only measured her flaws. One evening, while Alex worked on repairing a broken light orb in her private garden, Elara finally spoke freely. Why do you care? She asked quietly, her blue eyes reflecting the soft glow of the orb. Alex paused, looking at her with a calm smile. Because everyone deserves care, he said simply. Even a princess no one else notices. Those words struck a chord in Elara's heart. For so long she had been overlooked, dismissed, and unloved, yet this human boy treated her with kindness without expecting anything in return. She realized that perhaps, just perhaps, she could trust him. The thought was both frightening and exhilarating. As days turned into weeks, Elara began to look forward to Alex's visits. She would find small excuses to speak to him, to watch him work, or to walk beside him as he inspected the palace's machinery. With each interaction, her laughter grew a little louder, her smiles a little more genuine. The garden, once a place of solitude and sorrow, became a space where she could feel a spark of joy. Alex, unaware of the profound impact he was having, continued with his work and his quiet gestures. He never forced affection, never sought to impress, and never demanded recognition. Yet the human mechanic's patience, sincerity, and simple acts of kindness were breaking through centuries of loneliness and doubt, teaching the alien princess that connection and trust could be built, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. By the end of the fourth week, Elara no longer felt invisible when Alex was near. She discovered a sense of comfort in his presence, a feeling that someone truly saw her for who she was. And although she had not yet admitted it aloud, her heart was beginning to hope, not for acceptance from the court, but for the human who had shown her a world beyond judgment, a world where kindness mattered more than perfection. The princess, once defined by her scars and isolation, began to feel something new, a quiet, growing warmth in her chest. She had not yet dared to speak of it, but she knew that the human boy had awakened a feeling she had never known before: hope, trust, and perhaps the first stirrings of love. The court continued its whispering, the nobles continued their judgments, but none of that mattered to Alara when Alex was near. For the first time she was not alone, and she was beginning to believe that someone might truly care for her, just as she was. Word of Alara's growing friendship with Alex spread quickly through the palace, carried by whispers, sidelong glances, and the murmurs of servants. The nobles, who prided themselves on tradition and status, were shocked that a human, a species considered fragile and unremarkable, had been allowed near the princess. Some of the elder advisors frowned deeply, their long robes rustling as they conferred in quiet corners. "She must avoid him," one said. "A human is no match for a Zephyrian noble," another agreed. Their words echoed through the marble halls like a warning. Gossip traveled faster than the palace guards, reaching every corridor and chamber. Courtiers discussed how a union with a human would shame the royal family, how outsiders could never understand Zephyrian culture, and how it would disrupt centuries of tradition. The young suitors, already anxious to win Alara's hand, exchanged smug looks, certain that her attention to a human could be corrected with gentle reminders of her duty. The pressure, though subtle at first, began to weigh heavily on the princess. Alara felt torn. She valued Alex's kindness, his gentle patience, and the way he had treated her with respect when no one else would. With him, she could laugh without fear, speak without pretense, and feel a connection that she had never known in the cold halls of the palace. Yet the whispers of the court gnawed at her confidence, filling her mind with doubt. Was she being foolish to trust a human? Could she ignore centuries of tradition without bringing shame upon her family? Some evenings she would sit in her chamber, staring at the crystalline patterns etched into the walls, the soft light reflecting off her scars. She remembered the gentle encouragement Alex had given her and the quiet conversations that had made her smile again. Then she would hear the echo of the nobles' voices, their disapproval and discontent, and a shiver of fear would run down her spine. Her heart wanted to follow its own desire, yet her mind warned of the consequences. Despite the palace pressure, Alex remained unaware of the gossip swirling around them. He treated Alara as he always had, with quiet care and genuine interest. When he repaired a broken instrument in her study or carried heavy books from the archives, he never mentioned the whispers or the judgment of the court. His steady, unassuming presence offered a calm contrast to the tension building around the princess, reminding her of what mattered most: trust, kindness, and understanding. Alara began to notice small signs of support in unexpected places. Some palace staff, who had quietly observed her interactions with Alex, would smile at her in passing or leave small notes of encouragement in her chambers. These gestures, though minor, strengthened her resolve. She realized that while the court's gossip was loud, not everyone shared the same rigid views. There were those who valued kindness, sincerity, and courage above lineage and tradition. One afternoon, while walking through the palace garden, Alara confided in a close attendant, a young Zephyrian named Leora, who had quietly supported her for years. "I don't know what to do," Alara admitted, her antennae drooping slightly. "I care for him, but everyone says I shouldn't. They say I must choose a noble, someone from our own people." Leora placed a hand on her shoulder, her eyes kind. "You are the Princess Alara. No one can decide your heart for you. If he makes you happy, then that is what matters. Tradition is not stronger than love or truth." The words echoed in Alara's mind as she wandered the winding paths of the garden. For the first time, she considered that perhaps the opinions of the court did not have to dictate her choices. Her heart leaned toward the human who had treated her with respect and seen her true self, while the palace whispered threats of scandal and disapproval. The weight of centuries of expectation pressed upon her, yet she began to feel a small surge of courage. The festival, a grand event where the nobles expected her to display loyalty to tradition, loomed ahead. Alara knew that she would have to make a choice, not only between a human and a Zephyrian suitor but between fear and her own heart. The pressure was immense, but the quiet confidence Alex had shown her in everyday acts of kindness gave her strength. She realized that she did not need to please the court or follow their strict rules. What mattered was honesty, courage, and the one person who had stood beside her without judgment. As the evening sun painted the palace walls with golden light, Alara stood on her balcony, gazing across the courtyard where preparations for the festival were underway. Her heart pounded with nervous anticipation. She knew that soon she would have to act, and the whispers of the court would fall away before the truth of her feelings. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. In that moment she resolved that her choice would honor her heart, not the expectations of others. The court could murmur and whisper. The nobles could demand tradition and conformity. But Alara, for the first time in her life, felt the quiet power of her own voice. And she realized that when the time came she would no longer hide behind fear, doubt, or the opinions of those who could not see her true worth. The palace courtyard gleamed with polished stone and glowing lanterns, filled with nobles in elaborate robes and jewels that sparkled in the light of Zephyria's twin suns. Music played softly from hovering instruments, and exotic flowers perfumed the air, but Alara felt none of the joy around her. Every glance from the crowd reminded her of her scars, her solitude, and the whispers that had followed her for years. Her blue skin shimmered faintly, and her antennae twitched nervously as she tried to steady her breathing. The nobles murmured among themselves, anticipating her choice. She must choose carefully, one whispered. A human is beneath her station, another said. The crowd leaned in, waiting to see if she would bow to tradition or surprise them all. Alara's heart raced, but her eyes were fixed on Alex, standing quietly a few steps away. He did not demand attention. He did not flaunt his presence. He simply waited, calm and supportive, the way he had every day for weeks. With a deep breath, Alara took a step toward him. The murmurs of the court grew louder, voices rising like a tide of disapproval, but she felt a strange sense of calm. Alex reached out gently, taking her hand in his own. His touch was steady, warm, and reassuring. It was a small gesture, yet it carried more courage and sincerity than any display of wealth or power could. She felt the nervous trembling of her own heart settle as she realized that this human, so different from her people, had seen her for who she truly was. Alex looked at her with quiet determination, his eyes meeting hers without fear or hesitation. The crowd noticed the human's boldness and gasped softly. "I do," he said simply, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. The words were not grand or rehearsed, but they resonated with truth. He did not speak of wealth, titles, or obligation. He spoke of care, respect, and love. The nobles froze, shocked. Many could not comprehend that a human had dared to declare his devotion so openly in front of the entire court. Some whispered, others stared in disbelief, but no one interrupted. Alex's courage had silenced the room. Alara's chest swelled with relief and joy. Her heart, long weighed down by loneliness, lifted as she realized that she had finally found someone who valued her for herself, not for her royal title or her appearance. For the first time, she smiled without hesitation, and the princess's natural glow seemed to brighten, reflecting the warmth of her happiness. She squeezed Alex's hand, feeling a connection that no noble custom or judgment could sever. The whispers of tradition faded in comparison to the undeniable truth of what was happening. Kindness, courage, and honesty had won the day. Slowly the nobles began to see it too. They witnessed a human and a princess standing together, unafraid of convention, united by sincerity and mutual respect. Some faces softened, realizing that perhaps love and courage were more important than bloodlines and perfection. Even those who had been the harshest critics could not deny the authenticity of what they saw. Alara's antennae lifted slightly, a subtle sign of her confidence returning. The courtyard, once full of tension and judgment, now hummed with a sense of wonder. The princess realized that she no longer had to hide behind walls of doubt or fear. She could be herself, and she could choose someone who truly cared for her, regardless of species, status, or tradition. Alex knelt gently before her, bowing his head not as a gesture of submission, but of respect. "I choose you, Alara," he said again, this time adding softly, "not because you are a princess but because you are you. All of you, your scars, your heart, your courage, I see it all and I care." Alara's eyes shimmered with tears, not of sadness but of relief and joy. For years she had felt unwanted, unseen, and unloved. In this single moment the weight of rejection lifted. A human boy, underestimated by her people, had shown her the kind of bravery and empathy that no noble court could teach. The music resumed softly as if the courtyard itself was celebrating. Some nobles bowed in respect, others simply stepped back, unable to interrupt the quiet miracle unfolding before them. The festival continued, but nothing else mattered. For Alara, the loneliness of years dissolved, replaced by trust, love, and a newfound sense of belonging. As she stood beside Alex, holding his hand tightly, she realized that her scars no longer defined her. They were a part of her, yes, but they did not diminish her worth. She had been seen, truly seen, by someone who mattered. And in that moment, Princess Alara knew that courage, kindness, and sincerity could defy tradition, change hearts, and even inspire an entire kingdom to reconsider what truly mattered. The festival would be remembered for many years, not for its grandeur or displays of wealth, but for the bravery of a human mechanic who had dared to speak his heart and the princess who finally found the courage to trust it. In the golden light of Zephyria's twin suns, love, respect, and empathy triumphed over fear, judgment, and prejudice, reminding everyone that sometimes the smallest acts of honesty could change the course of history. Ilara's fingers tightened gently around Alex's hand as she stepped forward, standing beside him with a confidence she had never felt in the palace before. The crowd of nobles, who had spent weeks murmuring about her unusual friendship with a human, went quiet. Eyes that once judged and whispered now widened with surprise, and slowly, a sense of admiration began to replace skepticism. For so long, humans had been considered small, fragile, and unworthy of positions near royalty. They were underestimated in every way, physically weaker, culturally inexperienced, and supposedly incapable of understanding the delicate politics of Zephyria. Yet here was a human, not bowing to tradition or showing arrogance, but standing with honesty, courage, and respect. He had treated the princess with care, not flattery, and his presence had changed everything. The elders, once the harshest critics, exchanged glances. They saw that Alex's bold declaration was not reckless, it was sincere. He had not sought power, recognition, or reward. His bravery lay in his simple choice to act with integrity and follow his heart. One by one, some of the Zephyrian nobles began to nod subtly, their expressions softening. If a human could demonstrate such honesty and courage, perhaps the rigid assumptions they had held for centuries needed reconsideration. Ilara smiled at Alex, her glowing blue skin reflecting the soft light of the courtyard. Her scars, which had been a source of shame and solitude, no longer felt like a burden. She realized that true acceptance came not from the approval of others, but from being seen by someone who valued her whole self. Alex had done that effortlessly, and in doing so he had changed the atmosphere of the entire festival. A hush fell over the courtyard as the first Zephyrian noble approached them. With a polite bow, he extended a hand in congratulations. "You have shown us a new way," he said quietly, addressing both Alex and Ilara. "Perhaps we have judged too quickly. Courage, honesty, and compassion, these are qualities we should value above bloodlines or appearances." One by one, others followed, offering nods, small smiles, and gestures of respect. Even the young suitors, who had hoped to capture the princess's hand through status and tradition, looked thoughtful. The whispers of gossip faded into admiration, and a sense of possibility filled the air. If a human, underestimated and small, could inspire change through kindness and courage, then perhaps the old rules were not as unbreakable as they had seemed. Ilara felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of joy, relief, and pride. She had found someone who respected her, who encouraged her to trust herself, and who had stood by her in front of the entire court without fear. She realized that humans had a kind of bravery that did not come from force or wealth, but from honesty, empathy, and the courage to act according to one's heart. Alex squeezed her hand gently, his own face calm but glowing with satisfaction. "I only did what felt right," he said softly. "You deserve to be treated with respect, and no one should make you feel small." The simple words carried more weight than any proclamation of title or rule. The nobles and attendants who had been watching began to understand that human courage was different from Zephyrian displays of power. It was quiet, persistent, and deeply sincere. For centuries, humans had been underestimated, their abilities overlooked, and their contributions ignored. Now, everyone saw firsthand that their strength lay not in appearances or traditions, but in heart and principle. As the festival continued, laughter and conversation filled the courtyard once more. But now it was different. There was a sense of openness, a recognition that the unexpected could inspire respect, and that small acts of courage could reshape perspectives. Ilara and Alex stood together, no longer merely a princess and a mechanic, but as symbols of change and hope. Years later, stories of the festival and the human who had won the princess's trust and admiration spread across Zephyria. Children and young nobles were taught that bravery could come in many forms, that kindness could challenge prejudice, and that one human's honesty could alter the thinking of an entire court. Ilara and Alex continued to be seen together, partners in both heart and purpose, their relationship a living testament to the power of empathy, courage, and love beyond appearances. In the quiet moments after the festival, Ilara looked at Alex and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." He smiled, his eyes warm. "I only saw the truth, Ilara. The rest was already there." And in that moment, both the princess and the court understood a new truth. Humans, often underestimated, could achieve extraordinary things simply by acting with honesty, integrity, and heart. The galaxy had a new lesson. Sometimes, the smallest and simplest actions could create the greatest changes. The festival became remembered not for its grandeur, but for the courage of a human and the wisdom of a princess who dared to trust him. Their story would inspire generations, proving that empathy, bravery, and sincerity were the truest measures of greatness.